Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. Tiger 1 today. I think it's time we got the chassis rolling under its own power. And for that we're going to need the Heng Long bits off the stock chassis. Okay, first up, the battery needs to come out, and you should really take the battery out when you're done running it. But yeah, laziness. And with the way the tank's wired up, when the switch is off it's open circuit anyway. And that's the excuse I'm going with. In this revision of the Tiger, the upper hull is attached with 6 screws, and from what I can tell, the older versions had some screws up under the side skirts which required some of the wheels to come off first. With this one, they're all accessible from the bottom. The front two are hidden under the fake spare track segments. They're only held on with a couple of clips. If you pull them, they pop off quite nicely. With the 6 screws out, the upper hull can lift up, but it's still attached by some tubes at the back. With a small screwdriver you can loosen the clamps and pull the tubes free. Now the upper hull can lift off cleanly, revealing the slightly iffy internals. Nice. The two halves are still attached by some of the cables, so don't whip the upper hull away because you'll probably end up breaking something. The 27 meg antenna has a connector in line under some heat shrink, but we want to remove it entirely, so the little screw that attaches the wire to the brass post in the top can get unscrewed. The large cable can be unplugged. It runs the turret rotation, elevation and lights. The other 2-wire one is, as far as I can see, the BB firing motor. Its connector is jammed up beside one of the switches. We might as well remove the RX-18 to free it, since it needs to come out anyway. And there we go, separation. Okay, we need to free the RX-18. We don't need the motors and gearboxes, so they can unplug. Hang on. And no wonder it was a bit noisy, the right motor is wobbling about. The screws aren't done up, that's quality control at its best. Well done, Heng Long. The battery lead has a little bit of a problem. The connector doesn't fit through the hole. Not a biggie, for now we'll just disconnect the other end from the RX-18. The smoker power switch and volume control are attached with 2 screws each. They come out nice and easy. The 27 meg receiver has a screw in each corner. The speaker is, surprisingly, just pressed onto a post on the side. The smoker is attached with 3 screws that you can get to in the battery compartment. And that just leaves the battery connector and switch. The switch is just like the other 2 screws and out it comes. The connector though is a bit more fiddly. You could chop it off and replace, or desolder it from the switch, but it's pretty simple to dismantle a Tamiya connector. There's 2 barbs on the metal spill that need to get pressed in so you can pull it apart. You just need something that you can get down the side and give them a press. Here's a look at the spills where you can see the little barbs. Just press them in and they slide out. Simple. Reassembly is easy too. Just make sure you get the red and black wires around the right way. Double check with the battery. Just don't connect it just in case something shorts out to the power switch when you're not looking. That's the electronics out. They didn't put up much of a fight at all, surprisingly. Another little thing, one of the simple mods for the chassis is to fit some metal strips to reinforce the stock suspension arm mounts. Looks like Heng Long thought it was a good idea and have fitted some stamped steel from factory. Neat. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the stock chassis. Might get some nylon tracks and see if we can do something silly. Okay then, here's our little pile of electronics, complete with some very sticky foam on the RX-18. That's going to be fun to get off. It's quite a neat little unit. It's got the ESCs for the main motors in it, as well as drivers for the turret, BB gun and the smoker. It's also got the rather basic sound generator and amplifier. It's not great by any means, but I do like that they've put the effort to make it a standalone box and just not stuck in a bare PCB. Here's the smoker, basically a motor running an air pump and a heating element around some material soaked in oil. Quite neat, but it's way too noisy. There's also the little speaker, probably 8 ohm with a paper cone, really cheap. I'll probably replace it with a pair of 40mm 4 ohm speakers wired up in series. Maybe make some little enclosures that run along the side of the hull. That's going to need some planning. Anyway, the 3 screws in the bottom of the smoker seem to line up with the 3 holes in the electronics tray of the new chassis, which means the tray has to come out again. It's just 4 screws and it's easy enough to find them as we fitted them in the first place. With the tray out, the smoker can be fitted with the 3 screws we took out before. The good news is the posts almost line up with the hole. If you fit the screws loosely, you can get the post to take up the difference when you tighten them. The tray can go back in, making sure we don't trap the connector in the suspension. The 4 screws go back in. There we go, tidy. Looks like we'll need to change the tubes on the smoker though, as they don't quite reach the holes. Looks like the receiver will mount on this post. It's not ideal because it's going to flap about in the breeze a bit. You could always pack the gap, but hopefully we won't be using the 27 meg radio long enough for it to be a problem. We might as well pop in the battery just so we can check clearances. It's held in with a Velcro strap, and there's a couple of ridges on the electronics tray to stop it sliding around. Simple, but it seems to work a treat. Looks like the RX-18 is going to fit up the front here, and still leave enough room for the radio. Yep, that'll do it. One of the screws that was holding the radio in on the Heng Long chassis will do fine here. The RX-18 needs that sticky foam pad peeling off, or most of it anyway. That's good enough, I guess. A couple of bits of fresh servo tape can go on now, and it can get stuck on the tray. Nice and tidy. The motor wires can connect up to the RX-18. They're way too long at the moment, so we're going to need to be careful that they can't get caught up in the gearboxes. Antenna now, and we don't really want that steel whip antenna on the top hull, so I'm going to replace it. We could use the stock connector and solder some wire to it, but it's going to be neater and more reliable if we just solder a new one-piece antenna directly to the PCB. The receiver needs to come out again, and we need all the bits of the stock antenna and some wire. Pretty much any fairly thin wire will do, solid core or stranded. We need to add up the length of the stock parts, the whip, the 2 bits of wire, and this gives us our antenna length. It's not going to be perfect, but the stock setup isn't either. It's going to be good enough though, especially given most tank driving is done at a relatively short range. The stock antenna is soldered to a pad on the bottom of the board, which is right next to a much nicer mounting point with a hole, so we're going to use that. Heat up the joint and remove the wire. While we're here, I'm going to clean up a couple of other joints where they've been a bit mean with the solder, or appear to have forgotten to use any flux. Right, the new antenna, with its end stripped and tinned, gets put through the hole and soldered in place. Here's some more attention to detail from Heng Long. The 2 resistors have been hot glued to keep them stable so the legs don't fatigue and break. Nice. But the 2 caps at the other end are free in the breeze, which is not so good. The receiver can go back in now with its 1 screw. The antenna can run around the edge of the hull with a length of antenna tube to guide it. The stock speaker needs to find a spot. It should fit up on the side like it was on the stock chassis. There's no post for it to mount to, so we're going to need some more servo tape. It should end up sitting just under one of the air vents on the upper hull. The antenna can now route around the speaker. We're just going to use a bit more servo tape for now to stick it in place. It looks a bit messy, but it's all going to have to come apart again for paint, so it'll do for now. There's the power cable to go in. There's no mounting point for the switch on this chassis, so a bit more servo tape will do the job. Same goes for the smoker switch and the volume control. There we go then, nice and almost tidy. It'll do for testing though. The end of the antenna is a little bit close to the gearbox, but I think we'll get away with it. Right, make sure the switch is off. Connect the battery. Okay, no smoke coming from strange places. The headlights on the top of the hull would be blinking if they were connected, so let's start her up. So far so good. Main gun. Machine gun. Nice. And it goes too. Well, it's still a bit tricky to drive slowly, but the gearing has definitely helped quite a bit. It's a lot smoother at the lowest speed. Nice. Right, let's try it with the smoke. Well, the smoke motor's still louder than the sound effects, but it's producing smoke. It's hard to see against the white background, but it's there. Just one more thing to do in this video, take it outside and see how it rolls. smooth, if a bit noisy. Spinning on the spot is still a little bit sensitive. You have to be really careful with the stick movement. But it's definitely a vast improvement on the stock gearing. I think to improve it more, we're going to need some better electronics. Need to have a think about that. Do I design my own or go with one of the aftermarket decisions? The amount of torque those gearboxes produce is quite impressive too. They pull the 10-pound chassis over the slab with no signs of stress. The road wheels are bobbing up and down on their torsion bars. Love it. Well, that's going to have to do for today. Thanks for watching. Like if you liked, and if you're not already, do please subscribe. It's free after all. Bye guys.